Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Moving Markets Podcast. It is Monday, August the 10th, 2026. Stock market is just a few seconds away from opening for the new trading week. It's safe to say that we are winding down the doldrum summer months, the brutal summer months that we sometimes tend to dread in the market. It'll be incredibly interesting to see how the month of August goes, because August is traditionally one of the worst months in the markets. So far, I mean, last week being the first trading week in August, that has certainly not been the case because the markets had a really good week last week. So there were a couple of days last week that were not real pretty, but overall, the markets had a very good week last week. So it will be interesting, to say the least, to see if August can break that traditional cycle of being one of the worst months. The thing that gives it the best chance of breaking that cycle is to get this crap wrapped up in the Middle East, or at least to get some type of finality done with the situation with the Strait of Hormuz. There can still be some back and forth, some tit for tat, some deal making going on with Iran. If we can get the Strait of Hormuz completely 100% open, I don't think a lot of people care that much if there's continued ongoing stuff with Iran, in the way of, we keep on going after things, we keep targeting things. I don't think that many people are going to care about that if we continue to, if we get the waterway itself open, and if things start to flow through there, then I'm just of the opinion that people in general are not going to care very much about, are we still going back and forth with the leadership of Iran on some kind of final deal. I know the two things are tied intricately together. It may be, what I'm saying, it may be impossible to get one without the other. In other words, there might not be an opening of the Strait of Hormuz until we get everything else settled with Iran. That is certainly what they would like to have happen. I absolutely unequivocally believe that whoever's in charge in Iran, and there is a lot of question as to who's in charge. A lot of what's going on right now with Iran has to do with the political leaders potentially being like 100% at odds with the military leaders. And I do think there's some validity to that. I think that is probably, at the very least, part of what's going on. And so, you've got these two factions over there, one of them saying one thing, one of them saying the other thing. And it's going to be somewhat interesting to see how it plays out, but it's got to play out. It's got to play out soon. If we want to see the month of August salvaged. Now, the markets could perform well in spite of that. We have seen over the course of this summer an incredible resilience to what is going on over there. It's we do get short-term market reactions when there is bad news, like we've had just recently. We get short-term great market reactions when there is some good news, when it sounds like we're closer to having some type of a deal done. So you've got both of those things happening, but the markets overall, in my opinion, have built up almost an uncanny resilience to the news that's coming out of there, because this whole conflict in Iran, it's not good for the president. It's not good for his party. It's not good for Americans. It's not good for gas prices. Certainly not good for the people in Iran. And I think overwhelmingly, no matter where you fall politically, you want to see this thing come to an end. And I don't think I'm no genius for saying that. You could listen to me say that and go, duh, no kidding, Jeffrey. Everybody wants this to come to an end. So, we'll see how it goes. But that it's got to come to an end sooner than later if we want to see the month of August really be a good month. But look, in spite of the fact that today, so far in the few minutes the market has been trading, things are down. They're not down very much. The Nasdaq is pretty close to flat, 7/100%. The S&P pretty close to flat. The Dow's getting hit a little bit, and I was watching this morning. Apple's taking a big hit today. I was watching pre-market, and that seemed to be where a good portion of the damage was coming for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. I'm pulling up on another screen my chart of the Dow, and Apple, in terms of the stocks that are trading off, Apple's down a little over 2%, Home Depot down about 1.7, Sherwin-Williams down about 1.6. Those are all similarly weighted companies. They all trade in the 300 to 350 range per share, and that's about middle of the road for the Dow. You know, you've got the big behemoths like Goldman, Caterpillar. You know, those are the big boys in the Dow Industrial Average now in terms of how heavily they're weighted, and they're both up a little bit today. So that's kind of counterbalancing what's going on with a handful of these companies. If you had a chart of the Dow 30 stocks, it's pretty equal as to the number of stocks that are down and the number of stocks that are up. It's just that the ones that are down a little bit deeper, a little bit heavier. That's why you see the Dow down 0.25%. That's not that big a change. That's not anything that's going to get people overly excited today if it doesn't get a lot worse. Now, it's very typical in the trading environment that we are in that you can see. You could see things rolling over and tipping and going a lot further through the day, just from momentum trading. You could also, it's a small enough sell-off that it wouldn't be out of the question, or you wouldn't have to be too imaginative to see it reversing and going way to the upside, especially if some news were released today that sounded credible, that, we're talking with Iran, we're making progress. If there was a news blip that came out about that, you could see this thing turn around very, very fast. So August, the rest of August, got 3 more full trading weeks in August. It's going to be incredibly interesting. I think August has a chance to really break the mold and be a very, very positive month this year, but that's yet to be seen. As far as the trades that we have open, Google moving back up a little bit today. I think Google has seen approximately, I'm not saying they couldn't have another down day, but I think they've seen the fallout from this announcement about their AI personnel that are leaving. I think that's about as bad as the damage is going to be. You can see all 3 of those moving averages, the 5, the 20, the 50-day moving averages, they're all leveling off. The RSI remains above 50. And even in spite of 3 days in a row of selling off, the MACD, the momentum indicator, it continues to point in a bullish direction. So I don't see that reversing immediately. I don't see an immediate change coming in that. I think Google will bounce back nicely. Nvidia down a little bit today, but still trading in a nice spot for what we've got going on. I think Nvidia, I still believe Nvidia, before they report their earnings on the 26th, I do think Nvidia is making a run back to this high that they had back here at the 235, 236 range. That's not a long ways to go from where they're at, either percentage wise or dollar wise. That's not, again, that's not unimaginable that they could make that run up there. They've got the momentum. It's going their way. I think they will make, in spite of the fact they're selling off a little bit today, I think they will make a big momentum push back in that direction. Palantir, after a little bit of sell-off last week, they had that phenomenal earnings, that massive move up, a couple days of sell-off, and now you've got Friday and then today that's building on that. I told you, I think Palantir's all-time high was $207 a share. They got cut, almost in half of that, at least 40% down over this last year. I think they're on their way back to that, and I think they're on their way. I think they're on their way to 207 or more before their next earnings. So I love the way we're positioned right now with Palantir. And then we, of course, have our SMCI trade that's they're going to report tomorrow after the close. give you a preview of what I'm working on the rest of this morning. If the numbers are right, I'd like to get into a trade on HIMS because I think they're a potentially big mover on earnings. They report after the close today, so volatility is going to be extremely high. That would be a tricky one to get into. I also would like to get into something on CoreWeave. They report tomorrow after the close along with SMCI. And again, I think good or bad, I think CoreWeave is going to move big. I think there's going to be a very big movement there. So I'm looking at those as some trades to hopefully add. There's some other things I'm looking at, other earnings coming up later in the week that could be attractive. And then Cisco is one that I'm looking at for sure. And then I would love to look at another longer term trade, potentially on something that I think is going to take off. I might do a short term trade on SpaceX as well. I'll warn you right now, if I do a short term trade on SpaceX, I'm going to be super, super conservative in the number of contracts I do. SpaceX has been pretty flat today, up a little bit, down a little bit. But you're about to cross over technically here on this 5 and 20-day moving average. The MACD is in a very bullish pattern after the last, 4 of the last 5 days have been strong to the upside. I think the idea that SpaceX could quickly run back up to 50 is not out of the question at all. And a short term, like maybe a 2-3 week bull call spread, a very traditional starting both options out of the money bull call spread could potentially be a nice little trade for SpaceX. But I guarantee that is one that I would do with a really small number of contracts. I was looking this morning at a $1, literally a $1 spread on that. And with only a $1 spread, I was seeing a price of like 45-50 cents. You could have a really good return on a trade like that in a few days, but I would still be remiss to do a lot of contracts on that. I would make it a pretty conservative trade if I do something like that. So those are some things that I'm looking at for the remainder of the day today. And that's what I'm going to basically fill my day with, is working on stuff like that. So I'm going to wrap up right there. We'll get some new trades out today for sure, or at least we'll work on them. And again, I'll reiterate what I said last week. I'm not going to throw out a bad trade just for the sake of getting a trade on the books. We'll be a little bit conservative in what we do, and if that means nothing gets filled because we can't find really good prices that we like, we can live with that. But we'll definitely get some stuff out this week. So I'm going to wrap up with that. Have a great rest of your Monday, everybody, and I'll be back on live same time tomorrow morning. Thanks. Bye bye.